Okay, next slide, please, Leah. Let's talk about healing. Let's talk about resilience, health. And Tabitha says, we discussed the burnout across the board and supervisor turnovers. Directors just being present and showing up for your staff makes a huge difference. Yes, it does. Presence is so key, and I'll move to that in just a minute. So when we're doing healing actions, the four phrases that Pat and I use are to name, contain, make meaning, and move forward. So as a leader, one of the things you do is you name what's going on and you normalize it. These are the kinds of things that happen in our field. We know that other organizations are struggling with these. Yes, there is a way through. And part of what naming does is to help contain it, because then staff members know that somebody's kind of got their arms around it. And you can say, there are resources in the field. I can see what's going on with NCASA. I can always send an email to Shauna. We will, in fact, be able to move from here. Now, part of what's been difficult with the pandemic is not being able to get our arms around it, right? It's like putty, and it squishes out through other places. But as we continue to hold hands with one another, part of what we're doing is to contain what we can. Making meaning is part of that presence, that we can take the trauma and integrate it in ways that are both affirming and meaningful. And in fact, we may be able to grow from it. So let me just emphasize that all of this is about collective action, right? We name it for everyone. We contain it with everyone present, whether it's on a video call, whether it's email, whether we get to all be together. We make meaning collectively so that when we're making decisions about moving forward, we're doing that intentionally. I think some of you have heard me give a couple of these examples, but I want to give you examples of naming, containing, making meaning. So I worked with a tribal college for a number of years. I taught master's programs there, and I facilitated meetings and retreats. And one of the things that happened was that a much beloved young staff member died suddenly. And so what was really helpful was that the lead at the college said in a meeting with everyone how hard that was, that it was really tragic, not only for everybody on staff, but she was part of a large family in the tribe, and that it was a really difficult experience for everyone. The lead at the college said, we will continue. We will take this day that is her funeral, and we will not have classes on that day. However, we will hold our other classes, and we'll bring in people to backfill if we need to do that, if you cannot teach this week. They made meaning together. They said, okay, we all came together and we told stories about her a couple of times in circle, and not long and extended and like traumatizing, but ways that we could smile and we could cry and we could remember her. And then they set up, kind of out of the way, a little table that had a picture of her in sacred cedar. and a little journal where people could sign and leave comments for her mom, and her favorite food, which was Cheetos. So they had that sort of out of the way. It wasn't like when you walked into the tribal college, that was like boom, front and center, but it wasn't a place that was easy to find. And then moving forward, over time, inviting her mom to come and to open some of the events with a prayer. So that's an example. Another example is a youngster who was killed as the result of gang violence. And there had been a team that worked with her for many years. And again, just naming the grief, right? Trauma tends to come with grief and loss. And it's both loss we can point to, and it's also this sort of ambiguous loss of uncertainty. And being able to name it, the containment happened because the violence that happened was far away from this team. And their way of making meaning again was to collectively sit together and tell stories about her. And then they planted a rhododendron bush in her honor that would bloom year after year as a way of moving forward. So that just, I'll pause for a minute and see if anyone has questions about this information. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once again, after this, we're going to go into small groups, Leah, again for 10 to 12 minutes. And this is what I would like people to talk about. I'd like you to talk about examples from your organizations. What type of trauma, and we'll go back to that slide in just a minute. What was done that was helpful, and what did not help or exacerbated the situation? So for example, one of the groups that I've been working with had a situation where they had co-directors, and one co-director was African American and the other woman was white. And the African American co-director had gone to the board and said, this is a problem. There is lack of equity. She was supported by her white co-director. However, she had asked to be the one to speak up at the board meeting. And so she shared her perspective and what was happening, the kind of racial injustice that needed to be addressed within the organization. And the board responded within a month by firing her. And all of the staff saw the firing as being the result of a quote unquote challenge she gave to the board. And the board said that they fired her because of some other behaviors that they found not acceptable. That was a trauma within the organization that caused such a rift in terms of trust. And there was blaming for some period of time of the remaining co-director. What was done that was helpful was that the remaining co-director did meet with the staff, all the staff, and also met individually with the staff of color. And the BIPOC staff did a response to the board. And for them, that was really important, that they could share that they had, how they had made meaning and that they were moving forward intentionally. What did not help was that the board never responded to what was given on the part of the staff. I could tell you more about that story, but I'll just leave it there. So could we go back, Leah, to the types of trauma? Previous. There. So if people would look at this, because what you're thinking about is what has impacted your organization. And let's make it in the last 2 years. I realize that some traumas happened before that and are still reverberating, but let's try to keep it with the last 2 years. What has been done that's been helpful, and what has been done that exacerbated? So we can stop sharing and invite everyone into a small group for 12 minutes.
Okay, I'm just going to type the question in the chat so people can go back to reference it. So the question is, in the last 2 years, I'm going to think of an organizational trauma and what worked and what didn't work to address it.
There you go.
Okay. Opening the rooms now.
And you can stop recording and stop sharing. The comment about that, you know, the salaries, we can't compete. That's accurate. What we compete with is that we have work that is meaningful and we care about each other. Next slide, please, Leah. So we're going to move on and talk about building resilience. Next slide. You know, Diana Kudu talked about how resilience works in 2002, and you all just have continued to reinforce that. We have to face reality. We accept what our salaries are. We accept what's happening with the pandemic. And yes, things can be really difficult in the moment when we have staff turnovers. We search for meaning, and we do that individually and collectively. And I'm going to talk about each of these a little more. And then we want to be creative, and we need to be creative within what we already have. I mean, whether it's funny movies or texting each other, knowing that the leader is going to be creative and find time for us. Next slide. So first, facing reality, right? Part of leadership is that we confront denial. We keep with what is. Undiscussables are those things that we really don't talk about. Sometimes we actually are dishonest about them. Sometimes they're a secret. But it's a pretty interesting exercise with a group to have them write on little sheets of paper, what do we not talk about, or what are undiscussables, and throw them all in a hat and then take them out and read them. And people will be pretty much amazed at how similar they are. You know, Judith Herman said about individuals that the ordinary response to atrocity is to banish them from consciousness. Well, part of our work with sexual assault and with being in the field of anti-violence is that we don't banish anything from our consciousness. And so sometimes what we have to do is actually give ourselves some room to expand and think about other things. But yeah, no, we don't deny. We don't deny, we don't lie, we don't minimize. Next slide. I'm going to go through some of these quickly. We're collectively searching for meaning. So one of the things we do as leaders is we build those bridges, right? From whatever's happening now to futures of hope. And one of the comments that happened perhaps before everybody got back was a comment that what we lose through Zoom and video conferencing is that we aren't always able to benefit from one another's energy. We're not allowed, we can't feel it all the time. We can't build on it all the time. And so we're sometimes having to really dig deep for our own energy around how we keep that energy going. We're gathering people together with intention, taking purposeful collective action, whether it's planting a bush in someone's memory, whether it's, saying we are going to get through this. This is how others have gotten through it. And we take care of one another. One of the things that I ask people is, what have you done this week to show care for a coworker? Now, again, I'm talking to you all, the leaders, and I'm sure you've done many things that have shown care. But I often say that to staff because I want them to know that one of the ways that we can stay connected is really simple care. And I love it when they say things like, so and so sent me a note, so and so commented on my garden in the meeting this week. So and so just sent me an email out of the blue, just saying I'm thinking about you. Whatever little action we can do to take care of one another that's purposeful to build connection. Next. And then being creative. So being creative within our established practices. And I think you all again are probably building on some of this in your meetings. So everybody just pause for a moment and take a deep breath. I mean, really take a deep breath. Let your shoulders come up and drop, or take a deep breath and feel your rib cage expand. That small act of breathing, intentionally breathing, helps to release some of our creativity, helps to allow us to think more clearly. And it takes maybe a minute in a meeting. It isn't something that takes a lot of time. The other thing that I heard is, as you all are in this workshop, you're reflecting on your experiences. And anytime we do that and we share that with others in the organization, we help the organization as a whole to grow because we learn from our experiences. Next slide. So this is in for your use and your use with your staff team around building individual resilience. And a lot of these come from Angeles Arrien, who was a cross-cultural anthropologist. And the next slide. So part of taking care of ourselves and each other is being able, again, to stay out of denial and to acknowledge what increases our stress and anxiety and what we can do to decrease it, right? Somebody said that on the decrease side, they would say being a foodie. Other people might say music, calling a friend. Because when we're feeling that ongoing uncertainty, it's disconcerting. And for some people, it really can raise their stress and anxiety. So this exercise is an exercise where you simply give the 2 boxes to staff and you have them fill them out. What increases their stress and anxiety and what decreases it. With the title, Taking Care of Ourselves and Each Other, so people think about connection. Next slide. And then this is around your building team resilience. So many of you have talked about this. I mean, Dara just spent really a powerful statement about being present, and that staff need to know that we're present to them. Yes, we may have so many things to do. Yes, it may mean I'm not going to get to you for 5 minutes or 5 hours, but I'm going to get to you because I'm going to continue to strengthen our connection. I'm going to continue to show you support. And I'm grateful for the fact that you're here. And these are really so simple and yet so powerful for building team resilience. Next slide. In this workshop, you're learning about org trauma. And I wonder about the forums that you have where staff get to identify what happened and to learn from one another, and how they share that information with others. Part of why I had you go into small groups twice was to give you an opportunity to share information. And of course, we learned technology is not always our friend. But that kind of sharing information and your expertise is so important. You all are the ones who are living this and know what has worked and what hasn't worked so far for you. And being able to connect with others can add to what you already know. Next slide. This is a redo of what we have already talked about, but when trauma impacts you, this is a way for you to look at it and say, okay, what did Shauna say? What am I supposed to be doing? And next slide. Okay, and stop sharing. And we are at time. I would like to take just a moment to see if folks have closing comments or if you have questions. I'm happy to hang for a bit. Comments? You can stop recording. Stop the recording, Leah.